Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to what medieval junk food was like. I'll be real, I have no idea. I mean, medieval junk food. I don't know what, like, would they have had sweets in medieval times? I don't really know. They would have had stuff like chocolate, I assume. Pork scratchlings, or pork cracklings, whatever they're called. I don't really know. We're going to check this out and see. Because things like, takeaway restaurants or like fast food restaurants or whatever, like fish and chips. I think the first fast food, first fast food slash junk food restaurant in the UK was like 1850s or something. So before that, I don't really know what they would have been eating. But we're going to check this out and see. Hopefully, going to enjoy. Links also in the description to my Patreon. We can see reactions that I can't post to YouTube. But let's see some of the foods they had, and maybe I'll have some relation to some of them because we have them today, but I assume that's not the case. Let's jump into this.
Stocking up on chips and Twinkies and hitting the drive-thru for a greasy cheeseburger seem like modern institutions. But the world's love affair with junk food is a tale as old as time. A lot of what would become the fast food industry began in medieval Europe, where people satisfied their junk food cravings with some interesting cuisine. But knights weren't exactly galloping their horses through the drive-thru or grabbing candy bars on their way to the castle. Instead, medieval fast food catered to travelers and the poor, and it wasn't always tasty. Today in Weird History, we're taking a look at what junk food was like in the Middle Ages. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. And while you're there, leave a comment and let us know what other historical food topics you would like to hear about next. Okay, time to get medieval on those Cool Ranch Doritos.
Takeout was invented because poor Londoners weren't able to cook. See, wasn't the first takeaway place made in London? I could be wrong, but
London is a city known for its major landmarks and for being a hub of British
I think
culture,
it was fish and chips,
as well as being the place where Harry Potter was hatched in Big Ben by owls. During the Middle Ages, London was a center of trade and commerce, but poverty throughout Europe was high. So for many Londoners, it wasn't easy, convenient, or even possible to cook at home. Cooking equipment and fuel weren't exactly cheap. On top of that, the poor were packed into tenement housing that often didn't have any furnishings, let alone a hearth. Without a hearth, cooking was essentially an unscalable mountain, unless you wanted to fill your home with smoke and risk burning your already meager dwellings to the ground. So people visited cook shops instead, the old-timey equivalent of picking up some takeout. Cook shops sprouted up around the Thames to serve the community's fast food needs. These 24-hour cook shops supplied hot food to tourists and residents alike. They were open every day, with menus that changed depending on the season. But instead of driving through on a chariot or horse, the cook shops offered more of a stroll-through experience. Customers would walk up to the shops to purchase their favorite hot meal. Others would buy what they wanted, then take it home to eat later, because scarfing down a plate of takeout is not always what you want to do in public. Cook shops weren't limited to London. One city street in Bristol became known as Cook's Row. Bristol's cook shops offered more variety, including poultry and fish, and may have been among the first to subscribe to the adage, "It's the smell that sells." They'd have their hearths outside the shop and would strategically throw food on to cook so that the smell would entice customers over to grab a quick bite. Some shops served sweets, others were known for their pancakes and bread. But the most popular might have been the shops that sold meat pies. Those delicious meat-based treats were a popular seller, kind of like a medieval hamburger, but without the fries and Coke. Speaking of burgers,
meat pies were the Big Macs of the Dark Ages, when they weren't
everyone
spoiled.
loves a Big Mac. There's
Oh.
just something about clenching most of the basic food groups in your fist and then horking them down like a snake smuggling dinner through airport security. So it makes sense that meat pies, the Dark Age version of a drive-in hamburger, were so popular. These savory little Hot Pockets were filling and portable, the mark of a blockbuster fast food item. But Mrs. Lovett's signature dish had a dark side: spoiled meat. As it turns out, rancid ingredients could be a real problem in medieval cuisine. According to a 13th century Norwich report,
This is my city. This is the castle of my city. Wait, what the fuck? Imagine having this spoil. Oh my god, that is foul.
problem in medieval cuisine. According to a 13th century Norwich report, cooks would use diseased pork in their pies and serve
Welcome to my city, baby. That is foul. That's literally my castle. That is, I was not expecting that.
Serve them to customers without batting an eye. It wasn't uncommon for shop owners to warm up days-old spoiled pies instead of wasting them. Poverty was extremely desperate, and food safety wasn't exactly on the cooks' minds. So the decision whether to heap expired food onto the garbage cart or reheat it and sell it to customers was often disturbingly easy. Probably like it is today, if we're being totally honest. When they weren't recycling bad food, shops often undercooked the meat, which earned some cooks a bad reputation. A saying from the time claimed, "God sends the meat, but the devil sends the cooks." The shift manager at Waffle House used to say the same thing.
What the fuck? Carb loading including bread bowls,
Bread
pretzels,
was one of the
and
most common foods during Europe's Castle period, but most households didn't have their own grain, so they had to buy it from bakers. And while selling ready-made bread was great, bakers could do much more than that for their customers. For example, if someone brought their own meat to the bakery, they could have the baker wrap it in bread and bake it. The idea caught on, maybe a little too well. London passed a law in 1350
So was this the rise of breaded chicken?
London passed a law in 1350 preventing bakers from charging more than a penny if customers brought their own meat from home. Meanwhile, you bring your own meat to Burger King one time, ban you for life. It wasn't like it was
What
a
the
pound.
fuck?
Not sure what the big deal was. Another modern-day fast food item came about around this time too. The bread bowl. Modern Europeans pioneered the concept by serving soup and stews in a bowl made out of bread.
I've never had
which
that.
They called trenchers. The practice helped bulk up a meal and was probably cheaper as it cut down on the need for dishes. But bread bowls weren't the only carb-loading option of the Middle Ages. In addition to being a staple of state fairs and aimless mall wandering, soft pretzels were also incredibly popular in medieval Europe. 3 simple ingredients combined to create the twisted treat. Just mix a little bit of water, some flour, and some salt. And you've got yourself a filling snack officially approved by the Catholic Church. That's right. During fasting periods like Lent, when Catholics avoided eating certain animal products, pretzels often took their place as a substitute. Monks would hand them out to kids reciting their prayers, while others would distribute them to the poor. Outside of the church, pretzels became a symbol of luck and prosperity. And what's not to feel lucky about when you're chowing down on a
I mean, you gotta be thankful for the pretzels, man.
handmade pretzel? Nothing
Beautiful
completes a
food.
fast food run like a 6-pack of booze, because if you're treating yourself, you might as well go all the way. And while drinking alcohol has been a popular activity, medieval Europeans really liked to drink, possibly because they were living in medieval Europe. Not even Lent had any effect on the common folks' thirst for memory-erasing refreshment. Part of observing Lent meant not eating meat, so folks would fill that gap in their regular diets with other things. Fish became the alternative choice for some, others turned to booze. While it provided temporary solace from abstaining, the practice of staying thoroughly soaked through Lent didn't sit well with some prominent religious figures. In 1400, the Benedictine monk Robert Ripon had strong words for anyone drowning their sorrows. He scolded excessive drinking as flying in the face of the abstinence that Lent was meant to symbolize, and opined that people got more drunk during Lent than they did during the entire rest of the year. Of course, he probably didn't have to eat some of the meat substitutes that commoners were forced to turn to, like the mock egg, a dish that was invented as a meat replacement during Lent. If he had, he
What?
might have been pounding brews in the tavern right beside them. Making a mock egg is easy even today. Just take a few empty eggshells, fill them with a mixture of almond milk jelly and crunchy almonds. Then dye it yellow and choke it down with a mug of ale.
What?
Tasty? Now pass the beer.
Oh god. Sweets were so popular that the world's dessert was
Sugar
coined.
is one of those
The word
things we
dessert.
take for granted today. But during the medieval period, sugar was pretty hard to come by and was usually out of reach of the masses. Only those who could afford the expensive sweet stuff regularly consumed it. So rather than sugar-filled candy bars, people would flock to the cook shops for treats sweetened with honey. A fritter recipe from the 14th century cookbook Anonimo Veneziano calls for apples, saffron, flour, and honey. An earlier, more frugal fritter recipe was just fried dough, stuffed with gingered almonds and topped with a delicious bee juice.
Sounds good, although bee juice is a weird way to put it.
Gingerbread, another popular item for satisfying the peasantry's sweet tooth, also used honey, incorporating ginger, cloves, and pepper, giving it an inimitable sweet and spicy flavor. But when you're in the mood to throw money at a cholesterol spike, there's nothing quite like the funnel cake, a delicious combo of fried dough and powdered sugar. The mother of all carnival foods got its start in medieval times.
Oh.
Funnel cakes began as fried cakes called crisps. Because of their sugary topping, the cakes were a rare treat. Since ingredients like sugar was so limited, people would often improvise their own recipes, which is how we got dishes like fritter of milk, which is just fried, sweetened cottage cheese, otherwise known as a dessert you give your kids when you want to punish them. Waffles, as we know them, also came about during this time.
Ooh.
The original waffles date back to ancient Greece. Known as ovelios, they were flat cakes cooked between two plates, and they weren't sweet, which is a huge oversight that arguably contributed to Greece's downfall. Later, the Catholic Church began making flour waffle wafers, which typically depicted biblical scenes. But it wasn't until the Crusades when a more recognizable version of waffle batter, combining cinnamon, honey, and cream, really took off in Europe. And in the 15th century, the Dutch invented the famous grid patterns that transformed waffles into the optimal syrup and whipped cream delivery systems celebrated by junk food connoisseurs centuries later. Initially, waffles were a common street food, but would eventually become the breakfast and dessert staple we fling into toasters to this day. Thanks to the discovery of the New World, sugar became affordable and accessible to everyone by the 16th century. London even opened a sugar refinery, prompting a trend that continues in modern food processing today, adding sugar to almost everything. Sugar quickly replaced honey in most desserts. People began crystallizing their fruit in syrups, and even started using sugar to season their meats. If you cover a plate of fish and vegetables with
Wait, what? Sweet meat?
enough sugar,
Okay.
eventually it
I mean, I say that. I mean, we do have lemon, like we'll have fruit flavored sauces going on like chicken and stuff. So to be fair, that's not actually a surprise, but just sugar on like a steak, fair enough.
Eventually, it tastes just like sugar, which was a welcome respite for poverty-stricken families accustomed to eating rotten meat pies. Sugary concoctions became popular junk foods during the period, including crispy crusts topped with berries, fruit, or ginger, and a sweet, fruit-filled ravioli called Cuscanoles. Cuscanoles is just a good name. You can picture that on a Hostess wrapper next to a mascot, like the Cuscanoles Kid. This love of sweetness transformed the European diet to such a degree that the word dessert can even be traced back to this time. Derived from the French word desservir, meaning to clear the table, the French were using it to mean last course by the mid-16th century. The English later adapted dessert to refer to the final course of fruits and sweets that people ate after their meal. The Cuscanoles Kid would be proud. So what do you think? Would you be...
I love this guy's channel, man. His humour is so unmatched. It's just the way he describes things. The idea of honey being a sweetener for the poor. Wait, the idea of honey being a sweetener for the poor to an expensive item with sugar, now a cheap item is fast. That is wild. It's like they've reversed. Like everything's changed now. And I imagine in these times, the honey was legit. Like it was actual honey, not like how it is now, where in most shops you're buying it. It's just sugar with a little hint of honey in it. As a chef that's been managing cooks for 10 years, I can't tell you how relatable the phrase "God sends the meat, but the devil sends the cook" is. Pompeii had food stalls and quick shops too, so did ancient Egypt. It's nice to know eating out and allocating the time spent cooking to others has always been a thing. The moment when you realise medieval junk food is actually more nutritious than what you regularly eat now. I mean, that's not really a surprise, to be honest, but I guess in those times the junk food was, I mean, for some people, they would be only eating one time a day and stuff. Like, I mean, it was a different world, but yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this reaction. Let me know your thoughts on these incredible food items. My city even got a mention. I was not expecting that, but yeah, hopefully you enjoyed, and until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.